In the last lesson, we saw how we can create animation using the various tools in NATRON, and we have a set of tools that can create animation just by changing parameters like the noise effect, this kind of cloudy effect right here. And we use the timeline to set up the keyframes and to create the animation here. I created a movement animation using the transform node and using both the movement and the resize or rescale. And so I just overlap here a UFO saucer graphic. So we started to experiment with the raster graphics, but I want to show you also how you can work with vector graphics. And we started to see that we also can check our animation flow in the curve editor. So the curve editor can help you to define better the change of speed or the position in this case, so translate and the size or scale. So you can either work with the curve editor or directly in the timeline set it up the keyframes you need for your animation. And then you have dope sheet, which is again another way to select various keyframes in the timeline. It's kind of a expanded version of the timeline where you can see not only that there are keyframes in that particular moment of your animation, but also you can see which is animated, which is not. And you can also click and select the different keyframes inside. You can also hold the shift key and continue to click to do multiple selection, or you can click and drag with the left mouse to do a box selection of various keyframes. Now, once you select keyframes, you can also copy and paste them. So this is, I can hold shift, select this group, and then just delete them or copy them or move them around. So you can do these grouping and operations not only on one keyframe but on multiple keyframes at a time, thanks to dope sheet. So each editor adds its own functionality, its own reason to exist. Now, what I want to show you in this other lesson is other tools that we can use for animation and how we can create like infographics. So something that is more useful if you want to do like heads up display or titles or something for documentary or the television or something like that. So you can still use the effects we used on the previous lesson, which are again for animating. Well, I show you mainly how to animate the movement, the size, and you can also animate the rotation. But in this video, I want to show you also some extra stuff like opacity or things like that. So, well, the most beautiful thing, the most interesting thing is that you can animate basically anything in NATRON. Now, speed is also due to the frame per second value, which is called the FPS or frame rate. So if you have like more frames, you can also work with slow motion. So if you have like 100 frame per second, if you slow down 4 times, your video is not going to lose quality because you're still going to have like 25 frame per second. So when you want to do slow motion, be careful to have enough frames per second. Otherwise, if you only have like 24 frame per second in your video and you slow it down like 4 times, you're only gonna have like 6 frame per second or 7 frame per second, so it's not much. So if you want to speed up, well, that's no problem, because if I have 25 frame per second and I speed up 4 times the video, I'm gonna have basically 100 frame per second I can use. So the concept of time and space, it's related to the speed, but also the concept of frame rate and how many frames per second you have. It's related to speed and can affect the velocity or the speed of your composition. Now we have keyframes and interpolation frames. So when we're talking about frame per second, it means we have different types of frames. Now the keyframe is the one that you set up in order to have an animation. You need at least 2 keyframes. When you have 3 keyframes, you have a curve, and basically all the other frames that are in between the one keyframe and the other, they're called in between frames, and they're called also interpolation because they are created by the computer. And you can also try to manipulate that curve or that line and make it cornered or make it smooth or work with the handles. So you can edit that curve. You can work in the curve editor to adjust this interpolation and keyframes and in between frames. So in the past, the animators, they had to do all the single steps, so there were no like keyframes. But when using a computer, we just need to define the most important position in space and in time of our object, and all the rest is taken care of by the software. So that's the beauty of keyframing and interpolating. So we don't need to do all the rest manually. Now I want to show you again how to do something like motion graphics or infographics with text, like for TV or documentary, or some titles or subtitles, whatever, in your composition. And I'm going to use the tools that you already find in NATRON. So you can find inspiration on the web just by looking for documentary, motion graphics, or infographics, or TV shows, TV series, movies, and so on. So infographics are used to explain something, not only with text, but also with graphics. Now, in the samples, we found this animation right here, which is really useful because you can use it to study a little bit how more complex graphics, motion graphics are made, and this is not so complex. Now we have like a movement here of this little cloud. That's an example, so I can use this gizmo here to stretch it and resize it and so on. But let's have a look to this diagram here, to this to what's happening in this animation. You can see that everything is animated in different parts. So the clouds are animated, the character is animated, the box with the wings is animated. And so we want to discover more what's happening in this sample file. And as I already told you before, these are really excellent files to know more about NATRON, to study NATRON. So you can see this is the cloud right here that I'm moving, and we can access the various keyframes from here. Now, if I move the object in a point where there is no keyframe, one keyframe is going to be generated automatically. So it creates like a curve here. So if I go now in the curve editor, I can see what's happening again in the curve of this particular object. So depending on what you're selecting, that's going to show the animation. So you can see I can move around here the curve, I can move around the points, I can work with the handles, and I can change the way this curve is displayed, which is also going to affect the animation and the change in time, the change in the space, and of course in the speed. Now let me go back here to some the node graph, because I want to see here what's happening. So you see we have a final reformat node that is giving information to the final export or the final write, and the viewer here, which is showing